As a matter of fact, one of the things that I like to start off my talks with is reasonable people, equally informed, seldom disagree. The problem's the middle part, equally informed. The reason the framers were able to work together so well is because they didn't have competition with information. They all read the same books, Locke, Bacon, Montesquieu. And so we have to get back to those same things. We have to read the same things. Now, one of the things, as I log in here, one of the things I have realized is I like to equate the scriptures to the Constitution. Everybody wants to live the Ten Commandments, but how do you live the Ten Commandments if you don't understand them? They may make sense, but how do you understand them? I'll give you an example. Adultery. Thou shalt not commit adultery. It's easy. But I think you'll find that it comes more clear when you read the scriptures that if a man looks after a woman with lust in his heart, he's committed adultery already. Well, that doesn't say that in the Ten Commandments. No, that's why we have the scriptures. Our Constitution actually has scriptures to it. It is the law, and the scriptures, believe it or not, are the ratification debates. The framers actually told you what that line meant. When they went through the ratification debates, believe it or not, they actually went through it line by line. And so I'm not sure how many people have read the ratification debates, but I'm one of those people that just gets engrossed in that type of stuff. One of the things, and I want to share this with a way to approach kids. Kids love being right. They already know everything. So give them the facts so they can actually be right. So they can tell their parents, you're doing it wrong. We're not supposed to be voting for tickets. There's no control over party in the Constitution for its choosing the president. We're supposed to elect our electors, right? So in doing that, and in putting that paradigm out there for you, I would suggest that instead of having a ticket, have two presidential candidates and let the electors choose who would be president and who would be vice president per the Constitution. I'd even put it out there, and this is not even what I'm talking about, but I'd even put it out there. Consider this. Nominate your president today. It's all about messaging and marketing, right? Well, you already know you've got a mountain to climb in getting the message out. If you have your nominees 4 years in advance, I am the constitutional candidate and the presidential nominee for 2024. Well, you already now start your messaging. You can do that now. Yep. Anyway, it's all about challenging paradigms. Reasonable people, equally informed, seldom disagree. Another tactic or another fact I like to throw out there with people is knowledge is power. It doesn't become power until acted upon. So, in other words, it's just dormant energy. It doesn't become potential energy or kinetic energy until you start acting upon the knowledge you have. The other third premise that is critical is we are the problem. 9 times out of 10, our politicians want us, or actually want to do the things that we want them to do. But the problem is, these people over here, they want to stop abortion. These people over here, they want to stop the education of Common Core, vaccinations. The messaging is very scattered and all over the place. But it all has one thing in common. Every single one of these issues that we're fighting, from Common Core, healthcare, what have you, are all violations of the Constitution. So why don't you become succinct in your message and say, compliance to the Constitution? Now, most people don't even understand what a Constitution is. Give me 3 C words that means the same thing as a Constitution.
Contract.
Contract, one.
Compact.
What?
Compact.
Did somebody say compact? Okay, that's another one. Third. This is the tough one.
Covenant.
Covenant. Isn't that interesting? All 3 words that basically mean the same thing, but something's unique about our Constitution. It's not a general constitution. It's an enumerated constitution. And I will jump ahead to what Mr. Iredell said in the North Carolina ratification debates. I'm going to read some of these things to you so that you understand the gold, the actual national treasure we have in these ratification debates. If you really want to understand the Constitution, just like the Ten Commandments, you got to read these ratification debates. And I'll give them to anybody that asks them. I have them in a Word document so it's easy to search what I have. I don't have all of them. Now, if somebody wants to bequeath me with the documentary history of the ratification of the Constitution, the University of Wisconsin did, when they started that in 1976, on the bicentennial, I would be so humbly grateful. Mr. Iredell basically put it into context, and I think the light bulbs will be blinding in here. Have you ever heard of a general power of attorney? Do you want to give me a general power of attorney? So, but most people have heard of a specified, but there's another word for a power of attorney. It's called enumerated. It means you're listing very specific powers. And Mr. Iredell puts it into the metaphor, have you ever heard anybody that has been given a power of attorney to sell lands in Anson? And because you own lands in Coswell, well, clearly I could sell those lands too, but it wasn't listed. And we know that that's a violation of the power of attorney. You're only enumerated those powers. Well, does that make sense? We have an enumerated constitution that has granted the federal government very specific powers. And all powers that aren't within that constitution have been reserved. And as a matter of fact, when the Constitution was ratified, Massachusetts really started the ratification change because they were the first state to actually submit recommendations based on John Hancock and Samuel Adams. They sent amendments that they said, we think we want to see these. And when you start looking at what they were asking for, almost all of the states at that point in time started getting on the bandwagon. I'll give you two unanimous requests. The 10th and 9th Amendments, basically those were unanimous. All the states wanted that. Another one was they wanted to get rid of religious tests. They wanted to have religious tests as a part of their process. Now, I'm going to tell you that the framers' success was because they were able to put aside their differences. And when I say differences, it wasn't just religious, it was economic. I mean, the Southerners, they had slavery. The abolition movement was alive and well. As a matter of fact, in the North Carolina ratification debates, they already pointed this out. They were getting rid of their slaves. If we don't get on board with this Constitution now, it may be too late. They may actually get rid of slavery. It was a huge issue. So there were all sorts of differences that these men had that they had to decide. I can get into all sorts of history, and I don't mean to do that, but I want to just say this, that the real constitutional crisis that we're facing is constitutional literacy. Don't be reading ahead, by the way. It's constitutional literacy because nobody really understands these simple concepts of an enumerated constitution. So, I want to just say this, that the Constitution Party actually has the high ground because it's in your name, right? All you have to do is start living by and actually pointing to the Constitution. All the marketing you need, the other parties are giving you. I'm telling you. They're giving it to you. Make America great again. What does that mean? Make America great once and for all by getting back into the framework of the Constitution. What again? Anyway, we're in the midst right now of a Bolshevik revolution. If you do not understand, the Russian Bolshevik Revolution started in 1860. It didn't start in the teens of the 1900s. How did it start? Well, the Tsar emancipated 22 million serfs and slaves. Most people don't even know this. They just look at America as the big employers of slavery. 22 million. So now they got 22 million slaves that don't have any mechanism of self-reliance. Guess what? Well, the Communist Manifesto was available and handy, and collectivism became alive and well. The French Revolution was driven by the communes of collectivism. I'll even say this for those who love history. In 1776, 3 documents were written that actually shaped the direction of the world for good and evil. Everybody knows the Declaration of Independence, but most people don't know these other 2. The Wealth of Nations, the Bible for the free market. And the other one was the Charter for the Illuminati. Is that a coincidence? I will tell you, globalism and God's plan for this world is in the Constitution. These concepts of creating this one world order was already done by the Lord in the Constitution. Right? Article 4 allows any state to petition the United States to become a state in the United States. Did you think the good Lord intended that only the people that lived between the east coast and west coast of this latitude and this hemisphere and a few other places to enjoy liberty? Or do you think he wanted everybody to enjoy liberty? Let me ask you this. What would happen if Trump actually called upon the people of Hong Kong to have an open vote? We will actually come in and help them with the vote to determine if they want to become a state of the United States. Taiwan, Crimea. How about all of the rest of the world? And it's not something that happens becoming a state like that. There are parameters. You have to learn English. You have to change your monetary system. It's not like they become a state tomorrow. But what would China do if all of a sudden they were actually being confronted with having the United States right there on their doorstep? It would put them on their heels. We would actually be driving the dialogue of liberty. And I believe that was the design of this Constitution, was to drive the dialogue of liberty. Fundamentally, when you talk about the plan of salvation or the concept of salvation, saving souls, Christ said that it basically, I'll paraphrase, it's basically about liberty. Nobody can be dragged into the water to be saved. You can't be forced into compliance. And along that road, once you've taken his name, once you're living the commandments, you can't be forced into compassion. You can't be forced into giving of something. But we know when we live the commandments, when we follow him, right, we're going to be blessed. Who wouldn't want those blessings? But the fact of the matter is that you're free to leave that path any day. Liberty. You have the choice to learn, and you have the choice to do and make your own decisions. And the people that embrace liberty, I mean, we're repelled by the concept of forcing somebody to make the choices for them. That's the other side. If you look at the scale of liberty, those are the 2 ideologies. Is liberty and compulsion or enslavement? You have no choice. And folks, the Bolshevik Revolution is driving us into compulsion. We've already got a government that's compelling us on all sorts of things that are outside the Constitution. So the DNA is more than evident as far as I'm concerned within the Constitution. The Articles of Confederation were 13. And in the Constitutional Convention, the good Lord created this republic and the federal government in 6 articles. And he sanctified it in the 7th by resting the power upon the states. Most people look at the 7th article as like nothing. You know, we can just get rid of it. Are you kidding? It identifies who the stakeholders or the owners of this Constitution are. It was amplified with Article 9 and 10, but the whole point, and I submit to you that the Bill of Rights was not necessary. As a matter of fact, because of the Bill of Rights, we became complacent as a nation. Because the states would not have been guarding themselves away from this federal government trying to consume power. But I do believe that the Bill of Rights, by the divine hand of providence, saw the necessity of it because it was the 14th Amendment that actually created real teeth to the Bill of Rights. In Section 1, no state shall pass any law that abridges the privileges and immunities that the Constitution guarantees, which includes the Bill of Rights. And if you understand the whole point, it was all about protecting the freedmen and ensuring they had the liberties to do those things guaranteed by that Constitution. When I tell people that they're anti-14th Amendment, I say the Lord's hand is all throughout that document, or especially that amendment, I should say. In Section 1, it identifies citizenship. It identifies that the states cannot declare martial law. Most people don't know that, but martial law is the suspension of your privileges and immunities, being able to suspend habeas corpus and other constitutional rights. Well, when the 14th Amendment was ratified, the states now couldn't declare martial law. There's no exceptions in there. So to take away your right of assembly, to take away your right of religious expression, it's a huge violation of the Constitution. And what these governors are doing are violating the Constitution. And my favorite part is Section 3, and I'll get into that in just a second. But Section 2 identifies apportionment. And it redefines apportionment for representation. You have to be an eligible legal voter able to vote to get apportionment. California has 11 electors and representatives based on illegal immigrants. That violates Section 2 of the 14th Amendment. 11. So when you start looking at how many other states are out there, it's like, I think it's almost 30 representatives that would actually go away from liberal states out to, I'll just say red states, good, bad, whatever. Anyway, the fact of the matter is that the 14th Amendment was written for us, and only the good Lord knew what we would need today and what we would be facing. And Section 3 is basically, no person can be a representative of government, an elected official, a public servant who raises their arm to take the oath of office to support and defend the Constitution, and then having taken that oath, violate that oath by not supporting the Constitution. Now, there's two ways to not support the Constitution. I'll just call it the sin of omission and commission. Right? You can actively rebel against it, or you can sit on your hands and do nothing. The oath tells you have to support it. Sitting on your hands means that you have violated that oath. And so therefore, Section 3 then basically states that as soon as somebody has failed to support their oath of office, in other words, they're supporting rebellion against the Constitution, guess what? They're disqualified, not just from office at that point in time, but banned for life. Read it. I'm telling you, we could clean rank, we could drain the swamp tomorrow. Because nobody understands this. I've been working a lot in Wyoming, South Dakota, and up in the Northwest. And I've got a lot of legislators that are all on board. They support Republic Review, and the documents that you got is all about Republic Review, and it's about the process. I didn't want to necessarily come here and teach you that. As a matter of fact, I've got the content to teach you that. If you want to understand the origins of that, it was by the divine hand of inspiration, divine hand of providence. And actually, I wasn't touched first. I realized over time as the Lord started just showing me, just be patient, young man, just keep reading. Thomas Jefferson and James Madison actually exercised this concept that actually Thomas Jefferson wrote about in his book, The Notes on the State of Virginia, in 1784. And this is all about the 1798 resolutions of Kentucky and Virginia. When the federal government violated the Constitution, they called upon the states to join and take action to force the federal government into compliance, because they knew nullification would not suffice. Anybody that tells you that nullification is the way, it's tantamount to a fly swatter killing an elephant. Because nullification does not get rid of the evil government that has been created and that is draining us and destroying us and being used as a weapon against us. We have to interpose, which is why in Section 8 of the Kentucky resolutions, Jefferson calls for committees of correspondence and conference. If you understand committees of correspondence, that was the precursor to the Revolutionary War, where the states actually started working and talking, how are we going to resist this tyranny? Madison, in the same, I believe it's Resolution 8, where he talks about interposition, where the states need to join this state in the necessary measures to gain this compliance. I'm paraphrasing, but if you read one of my articles that's about interposition versus nullification, it's pretty settled. I mean, you'll realize that not only do the states have this responsibility, or I should say this opportunity and authority, Madison states that the states are obligated and duty-bound to interpose. So, We're fighting a lot. But I'm telling you, the good Lord gave us everything. If you understand this Constitution, and it's not rocket science, a moron like me, if I can get this, and the brilliance in this room that is shining today will easily get this. And I have one thing to tell you. I'm here to help, but I'm not from the government. So it would help if I actually turned this on. All right. So one of the things moving forward, and I want to read a few things. So Madison was asked in 1821 on his notes on the Constitution, why? Because they wanted to understand the Constitution. And they felt that his notes would actually create the clarity so that they could understand what these founders were really creating. And then when I say founders, forgive me, men are not founders in our Constitution. They were framers. The states are the founders. Like a founder in a corporation is a person who has the stake or the share. They're the owner. The states are the owners. And it's a huge misnomer calling men founders when the states were the ones that had to ratify. You know, the Constitution was ratified by we the people. It was representatives that we elected to go debate it and decide. It was not a democracy. They used representatives to determine what they were going to have for lunch. They were so Republican in form. Anyway, this is what Madison said to John G. Jackson when he wanted to, get his notes. And he says, but whatever might have been the opinions entertained in forming the Constitution, it was the duty of all to support it in its true meaning as understood by the nation at the time of ratification. I'll explain. When you are telling somebody that this contract is going to do something, I've just told you a legally binding definition. And as a matter of fact, if you write that down, if it's actually written down, you can actually take that person to court if you promised them a chicken in every pot. And you didn't get your chicken and a pot. I want you to understand the magnitude that these ratification debates provide. And as a matter of fact, Madison also stated when this Constitution was being actually violated, the resolutions in 1798, he actually said, hey, now is the time to move forward with cause. After the states rejected their responsibility, what did Madison and Jefferson, what were they left to do? The states ignored their responsibility. They did something that we cannot do today. They actually committed a political coup. Because they had Jefferson and Madison. I mean, where's my Jefferson and Madison to actually take charge and lead and take over America? Because they unseated a president and actually unseated Federalists, both at state and at the federal level, significant enough as it moved forward into 1816, when Monroe was, actually it was 1820, when Monroe was reelected. It was a unanimous decision that I believe was Vermont, where an elector in Vermont cast not his vote, so it would not have been a unanimous decision. In other words, the party, the Republican Party that Madison created was really the Constitution Party because it was all centered on the Constitution. The Republican Party today is a perversion of that, and that's why they call it the Party of Lincoln, because it's about big government and compromise. The Uniparty was created shortly thereafter. This is where they started migrating away from electors. The whole process, they actually started injecting statutes and regulations. Show me in the Constitution where you can make changes using statutes and regulations to the actual wording in the Constitution. The electoral process is very clear for the choosing of the president. We're to elect electors. The state legislators do not have the constitutional power to change the outcome of the election by winner take all. You've lost your representative. If your congressional district voted for an elector, the state senators or your state legislatures have already chosen by the popular vote. You lose your representation. Well, why don't we just change our representation in Congress to do the same? We'll just let the popular vote, and then all the congressional districts go with the party that wins. That's what they've been doing to us. I'm sorry, I get a little excited. But this is what Madison stated when it comes down to the Constitution and what you do and who do you do, or who do you go to when your contract's being violated, when the compact is actually being violated. Most people, well, we got to go to the Supreme Court. I am telling you today, every time you step into a court that has no jurisdiction, you've surrendered your sovereignty. And so this is what Madison said, that where resort can be had to no tribunal superior to the authority of the parties themselves must be the rightful judges. In the last resort, whether the bargain made, whether this Constitution made has been pursued or violated, the Constitution of the United States was formed by the sanction of the states, given by each in its sovereign capacity. It adds the stability and dignity as to the authority of the Constitution, that it rests on this legitimate, solid foundation. The states then, being the parties, constitutional compact, and in the sovereign capacity, it follows of necessity that there can be no tribunal above their authority to decide in the last resort whether the compact made by them or whether it be made by them be violated. And so bottom line is, the states are the ones that have been sleeping at the wheel. They've been lulled by this thing, this corruption, this money mill that's been in D.C. that actually promises them, oh, we're going to help you out, we're going to do this. You know what, folks? We're heading off that cliff. As a matter of fact, the land of liberty, we've left the land of liberty, we're already over the water. When we land in the next couple of years, it will be the land of liberty lost, because the states are going to have to decide whether they're going to allow the Constitution to be put aside and shredded once and for all, because that's what they have to do. The states actually have to let go of the Constitution, and this is why my focus has been with state legislators, and this is where I am educating them that when that time comes, we will have at least a few states to wake up and have these conversations with all the other states. Don't do this. This is our compact. They have no constitutional authority to do this. Only the states can allow the suspension of the Constitution. That's what Republic Review is all about. So they must decide in the last resort such questions as may be the sufficient magnitude to require their interposition. That's what Republic Review is about. That's what those documents that you received is all about. And so there was a thought of me talking actually on Friday and today, and I said, I humbly take whatever time you have. But my point is that you're on the high ground. Use it. You know, the Lord gives you the fulcrum. All you got to do is grab the lever and start moving, right? And I am telling you that when you start looking at what you can do with the Constitution, I mean, we were talking to a gentleman, Bill, and we were talking about red and blue. Well, how about parchment? Parchment's a great color, right? Let's make all states parchment. The sober note that Madison put in here, and this was the note that I basically try to use for this concept of secession. We have a responsibility in marriage to not just quickly choose to get a divorce. We have children involved. We have lives at stake. We need to be very sober in what we have to do if we really have to part our relationship. And the Civil War, the history is written. But we are facing a very similar point, and I believe, again, reasonable people equally informed seldom disagree. We need to get the state legislators to understand their role and responsibility. I would say the Constitution Party actually has, I've probably gone over, haven't I? No? Okay, good. You let me know. The Constitution, you guys have the high ground. You guys have the ability to actually call out both the Democrats and the Republicans. Yes?
Why is it you guys instead of we guys?
I'm sorry. Because this is a party. And I actually, one of my suggestions is you got to create a club. You have to have a transition organization. Why have a club? Well, because there's some parties that actually say you have to be exclusive. You can't be a part of the Constitution Party and a part of our party. If you have a club, then you've That's not a political organization anymore, and now it's an educational. As a matter of fact, you can use that club to go in and teach the Constitution to every county central committee, whether they be Democrat, whether they be Libertarian, whether they be Republican. Offer your educational opportunities because that's how you convert people when they start seeing the truth and they start realizing, wow, we're so far off the mark. This becomes another fulcrum and another lever. You would actually take ownership of over half of the Republican Party because and even part of the Democratic Party, the blue-collar Democrats, they love the Constitution and they would be abhorred with the concept of shredding it. They don't want to necessarily admit, but right now, what's in it for them? They got these perks with the union. They got these benefits. They got to keep their guy. And they don't see at the local level the damage that's occurring. But it's a gradual process of at least saying, hey, let me show you something about the Constitution. And I'm going to tell you, you're going to find that people's eyes will start opening up and they will actually, they walk towards the light. Right? In the middle of a dark forest, they see way over there, I see some light. I'm going to go over there because I'm in the dark. I know that the good Lord gave us everything we need in this Constitution. Section 3, when you actually start reading this, you can actually start holding, and you can point out to your Democrat, Republican, Libertarian, every politician out there, they're all violating the Constitution, and you can point out how. We have actual 2 tools in the Constitution, in our constitutional law, of mechanisms of actually draining the swamp. First is one that nobody even understands. The First Amendment petition for the redress of grievances, petitioning your government. How many people have used their First Amendment petition? And where have you taken it to? Have you taken it to your state? Have you taken it to your county commissioners? Have you taken it to your sheriff? And have you, in that First Amendment petition, demanded that they convene a common law grand jury, which is a part of our legal system. And a common law grand jury doesn't just give you an indictment, it can also give you a declaration of clarity of the law. Has the law been broken? And when it comes to this COVID, has your governor actually violated the law? Absolutely they have. And so that's why you call for a common law grand jury to prove whether they have or not. Leave it to the facts and let the common law grand jury do that. Now, if you start actually getting multiple counties to actually come forward with declarations that the law is being violated, and every public servant who has supported the violation of the Constitution has disqualified themselves in accordance with Section 3 of the Constitution and must be removed. I'm sorry, I didn't write it. The good Lord did. I'm just the messenger. And that's what we need to do. That's allow these facts to just come forward. All we have to do is the real question is, we all realize that we have our own problems, I've got a hip problem. We have some problems that are our own fault and some problems that are our own fault. Or others, or the good Lord gave us some disabilities or what have you. The fact of the matter is, the things that we can change, are we adult enough? Are we man enough? Are we woman enough to address that and change that, right? Are we adult enough to take a stand and say something and get out there and actually be bold and declare that we need to comply with the Constitution, folks? We've already lost all of these liberties. One of the things that I want to compare to, and I want to give you a good example between the Federalist Papers, because what are the Federalist Papers? They're insightful letters. They're just insightful letters. They're not legally binding documents, because these were not the words used to convince the acceptance of a compact. The debates, those testimonies given by the Federalists, that's what everybody bought into. So every testimony of a Federalist explaining the Constitution, those are what's legally binding. So this is what Madison said regarding a compact. This is Federalist Paper number 43. A compact between independent sovereigns founded on ordinary acts of legislative authority can pretend to no higher validity than a league or treaty between the parties. It is an established doctrine on the subject of treaties that the articles are mutual conditions of each other, that a breach of any one article is a breach of the whole treaty, and that a breach committed by either of the parties absolves the others and authorizes them, if they please, to pronounce the compact violated and void. Now again, we don't want to rush to that kind of divorce. Secession, this is actually the evidence, but not legal evidence, that the states could secede. You want legal evidence? George Nicholas in the Virginia ratification said something very similar, but listen to what he says. Have we not seen in America that treaties are violated? Because Britain was already violating the treaties, right? They were impressing our soldiers, or our sailors and so forth. Though they are, in all countries, considered as the supreme law of the land, was it not therefore necessary to declare in explicit terms that they should be so here? How then is this Constitution on a different footing from the government of Britain? The worthy member says that they can make a treaty relinquishing our rights and inflicting punishments because of all treaties are declared paramount to the Constitution and the laws of the states. If you believe that, then you have submitted to the lie. Because he goes on and says, an attentive consideration of this will show the committee that they can do no such thing. The provision of the 6th article is that this Constitution and the laws of the United States, which shall be made in pursuance thereof, and what he's talking about is the enumerated powers. They can't make a law that is not tied to the enumerated powers. And all the treaties made, or which shall be made under the authority of the United States, be the supreme law of the land. So this is the kicker right here. They can, by this, make no treaty which shall be repugnant to the spirit of the Constitution or inconsistent with the delegated powers. Now, do you think there's a big difference between what the Federalist Papers said regarding a compact and the absolving and what Nicholas just declared? Because he basically declared that if they create a law or a treaty that they have, just like let's say we create a treaty with the UN, that we're going to go into this national or this World Health Care, the World Health Organization, we're all going to become a part of that. If that is not an enumerated power within the Constitution, then that treaty is null and void. It's not within their delegated powers. We have all sorts of treaties. Let me ask you this. Where in the Constitution did the federal government get the amendment to be able to create land to give to a state land, to take state land and give it to somebody else and manage it forever? And what I'm talking about is Indian reservations. They had no authority to do that. This has been domestic abuse for a long time, since Andrew Jackson. As we start really looking at the Constitution, to me, this is not rocket science. It just starts really making sense when you really start looking and challenging it. It's really constitutional. Anyway, one of the things I wanted to actually share is the desire to change, because that's to me what political parties are, is to drive change. The fact of the matter is that our government is rock solid. It is enumerated in these powers. Now, you in the states have problems, because I'll bet you've done these bad, evil things like create general powers to allow your state government to have this general power. So we really need to clean up state constitutions and getting them back into enumerated, and I'm really looking down the road. But the fact of the matter is, in 1817, actually in 1816, friends of Madison, when he was getting ready to retire, came to him and said, what do we need to do that we can create a legislation that would actually, create a hallmark for you and, change and be better for this country? And Madison basically went into what Adam Smith said in The Wealth of Nations. If we could improve our highways, waterways, and the movement of commerce, we would become the economic powerhouse that nobody could compete with. And so they went across and they created a bill. It was called an infrastructure bill, and it was a really long name, so most people call it the bonus bill. But when they gave it to Madison, that basically he kind of hinted that this is what they needed to do, but they didn't understand. He vetoed it. And this was the foundation. This would have been the footings, the legal footings for an unconstitutionally legal footings for the Department of Transportation. And Madison said, you can't do this. This is not within the enumerated powers. And so when they started creating national monuments, you can see what the father of the Constitution received as a monument for him. They weren't done, though. Congress said, we really need to do this. We need to usurp this. We're not going to amend the Constitution, even though Madison said this. So in 1822, they went to James Monroe. And James Monroe's veto, admonishment, I think was better than Madison's. He brought in all four of the, what I call the mystical clauses: the General Defense and Welfare Clause, the Commerce Clause, the Supremacy Clause, and the Necessary and Proper Clause. He says none of those clauses are portals to grant the federal government any new powers. Those are only powers that accentuate or based upon the enumerated powers. In other words, they're only supreme in the enumerated powers. They can only create laws necessary and proper regarding the enumerated powers. The same thing with the Commerce Clause. Anyway, Monroe basically vetoes this exact same bill, or a very similar bill. It was a Cumberland Gap bill. And they would have created the footings for a Department of Transportation. Well, Congress wasn't done. They tried in 1830 with Andrew Jackson. And he, in the longest, is like a 9-page admonishment, said, if you want to change the Constitution, if the American people want us to regulate our highways and waterways, then you have to amend the Constitution. We had 3 presidents that said you have to amend the Constitution to create a Department of Transportation. Okay, friends, where is the amendment? I'm just trying to make a point. When you really look at all of the powers, the only way we get rid of those is republic review. The only way. We actually have to have the state legislators go through the audit. And if you look at what Jefferson did in the Kentucky resolutions, he audited the Constitution and how each of these bills of the Alien and Sedition Acts, how each of those violated the Constitution, what parts of the Constitution they violated. And so the Republic Review is literally auditing the Constitution, not just in the powers exercised, but guess what? If the Supreme Court has created laws such as abortion, such as marriage, anything that is not an enumerated power, they've overstepped their bounds, and plus they've overstepped their role, because they're actually supposed to be determining whether it is in the Constitution or not. Is it in the contract? If it is, then okay, this is based on contractual. But if it's not, and they say, well, we think this is a good idea, then they're supposed to go to Congress and say, create the law. But instead, they've aggrandized their position. John Marshall went down this power, and as a matter of fact, jurisdictions are really, really, really clear. But I want to give you one that John Marshall actually used. And this is what he said in the Virginia ratification base. He said, can they, the federal government, go beyond the delegated powers if they were to make a law not warranted by any of the powers enumerated? It would be considered by the judges as an infringement of the Constitution, which they are to guard. They would not consider such a law coming under their jurisdiction and would declare it void. So in other words, the Supreme Court, when they hear a case on marriage, when they hear a case on CO2, when they hear a case on life, guess what? It's not enumerated. The things they're supposed to say is, we have no jurisdiction. This is a state issue. This is not a federal issue, and it does not belong in the federal courts. It's really that simple. So back to what can we do with the Constitution Party and kind of innovating, and how can we get into creating symbiosis and synergy. And I will tell you that there are all sorts of constitutional organizations out there that that I'm already working with. Militias, I'm working with people in the NLA and other organizations. People that are already embracing this stuff. And as a matter of fact, the NLA is embracing and supporting Republic Review, National Liberty Alliance, I'm sorry. There are plenty of people that are waking up and realizing that the Constitution is our only saving grace if we want to save our liberties in this country. And so there's lots of people that are out there. I'm telling you, the militia is a huge supporter of the Constitution. They may not understand it, but they're getting there. And just like everybody, it's just, one page after another. I've got lots of articles. I would love if you would give me feedback on them. But the fact of the matter is that it's an educational process, but it's an action process as well. And getting people to start, the marathon isn't won in the last step, it's won in every step. And the toughest step is the first. Because after you've taken the first step, just repeat. Keep doing it, keep going, keep going, keep going. That's That's what we're doing here. We're actually in this race because people that are here are active, they're moving. And now what we want to do is, are we moving towards the light? Are we moving towards the shade of blue or the shade of purple or yellow, right in the spectrum? Let's move towards the shade of parchment. So some of the things that I really want to do, because I'm really, like I said, there's never enough time. We got to be leaders. Anybody that understands leadership and management, as a matter of fact, it's good to hear old Peter Drucker's smart rules of, setting goals. We have to be leaders. And there's a difference, and if you haven't heard this adage, it's just worth repeating. Leaders do the right thing. Managers do things right. When you look at the parties, they're managers. They're managing agendas and they do things right, and they get scolded when they start doing things like, I will tell you that when you start actually teaching Constitution classes to these other parties, because most people there want to hear this. They actually go to the party and they go, hey, how come we don't, we're not even talking about the Constitution here. Oh, well, we don't do that. Yeah, and so this is the opportunity because you make friends, you just go, they're open, right? Just like every other party, you have guests come. You align with some people that actually want to have those classes and lessons. And I'm telling you, it's almost like your missionary lessons. When you start teaching the Constitution, people are going to start recognizing, wow, this party has nothing to do with that. It's about agendas and control. Remember it was repeal Obamacare. Now it's repeal and replace. There were 26 states that actually combined and challenged that, and it was unconstitutional, but they made the mistake of surrendering to the federal court system. 3 states independently fought that. I believe Idaho was one of them. And they're all fighting this monstrosity, when they actually have the power to say, we don't have to do this anymore. The question is, are we adult enough to really face those things? Are we strong enough to get away from this beautiful safety net? I am telling you, we will face austerity if we're to save this republic. But the austerity we will face if we go into the land of lost liberty will, make our reclaiming the republic pale in comparison to the austerity we are going to face when we become subjugated, because the heel of tyranny is the most brutal. I can't say that enough. Lead on core principles. Again, a real leader basically finds the core principles, and liberty is that core principle. Making and assuring people understand how the Constitution protects that. How the Constitution can act, because everybody that is having to deal with what the federal government, or I should say the state governments are doing in violating the Constitution, they're just going, can they do this? No, but they actually can do something. They can actually, if you get sick, because the state has a responsibility to protecting people, they don't have to declare martial law, but they can say that if you are sick, then you must either quarantine or we will quarantine you, because they have a responsibility to protecting people from getting harmed or getting hurt. And so we've done nothing over the flu. And as a matter of fact, we lose tens of thousands, if not 100,000 plus on a yearly basis because of the flu. And worldwide, it's well over 100,000, I know that. And if you look at the numbers, the flu counting as of February, I think this year, the flu, the World Health Organization has no report of the flu. It's all COVID now. Because that's what's selling the concept of surrendering your liberties. We have to lead on compliance to the Constitution. Regardless, every person takes an oath. They have to understand that if they're not complying to the Constitution, they risk losing their position. I've had legislators pull me aside, GR, what are we going to do? We love what you're doing. We support everything. We love the Constitution, but we don't know the Constitution as well as you do. And I said this, every state, just like their state, needs to create an office that uses the ratification debates to determine what is constitutional and what isn't. I will help them get this started. But then they won't make the mistake. They have a resource to go to instead of a lawyer or a bureaucrat or another politician to say, don't worry, we've done this for years. If you can cite and you can prove that you can't do these things, then you can't. You can't be taking money from the federal government for your county roads, because that's an unconstitutional taxation. Oh, by the way, This is a house of cards. I've explained this to a couple of people here. We have a house of cards. It's time to blow it down. Amen. The debt that came with this house of cards is fraud. We, the people, are not obligated. If we have been done wrong, those who have done wrong are the ones obligated. So when China wants their money, which we're not obligated to pay, because the money that we're taking on to spend money on unconstitutional, illegal things, it's all fraud. So we send them Pelosi. Get the pound of flesh out of her. Obama, Clinton. All of these people who have been corrupt and have been literally destroying us, that's who they get. Because that's who's been doing the bidding. And so, you know what? We just woke up. Hey, surprise. We don't know this. It's gone. Think about that. How we doing? I'm about up. Remember, reasonable people equally informed. So if you get people equally informed, they will get involved. And as a matter of fact, they won't argue because they're not going to disagree. And as far as platforms, I will say you have to have two platforms. Your national platform must be full compliance with the Constitution. That's it. The federal government has enumerated powers, and that's it. Your state is based on your state constitution, and every state should have unique platforms based on the enumerated powers. And identifying those things, and here's the kicker, folks, many amendments to your Constitution at your state level have been mandated by unconstitutional powers, like your EPA. The federal government came along and said, we created the EPA, now you must create an agency to do this. And so they've amended this, basically driven by unconstitutional government. So everything that was never followed through a constitutional process that was federally mandated, that has to be thrown out. Because we've been duped. It's that simple. Yes, go ahead.
The trouble is that includes the Federal Reserve notes and
that's all unconstitutional as well. Absolutely.
the bar.
Uh-huh.
The bar is general interest.
Yes. And as we start uncovering all of these things, the first thing we have to do is we have to get the federal government into compliance, that they can't spend money. And as a matter of fact, if you look at Republic Review, we decommission all the unconstitutional powers and laws and all of that stuff. So by all means, look through the argument, the description of the process and the flow, but like I said, I could easily spend hours and hours of going through different topics and just leadership and how to set effective goals. Yes, go ahead. I'm sorry.
You have a book? Is your Republic Review in a book, on a website, paper?
So yes, I've written 2 books that really talk about this, but I don't peddle my books. Well, I'll give you.
Well, that doesn't help me.
Yeah, you can. If I will send you my books if you want to read them. I go into historical narratives of where liberty, how liberty was really founded, and how it has become essential. Because my first book is the narrative of liberty, and then the innovation of this nation. So yeah, I have books, but the documents that I've written are on reclaimingtherepublic.org. If you want my book, I'll give you one. But, you just pay for the postage or what have you. But
they're on reclaimingtherepublic.org.
Reclaimingtherepublic.org. Yeah, my cards are over there on that table in the beautiful card holder that my wife gave me.
Your juries hold it up.
There it is. Just pick that up. I respond to emails. I even respond to my wife when she's not talking to this ear because it's my bad ear. So anyway.
Thank you for being honest and telling us where we can find those things.
You bet. No problem. Yes, sir.
You mentioned the 14th Amendment, Section 3 is the power or the enumerated explanation of how to disqualify someone?
It is a qualifier of qualifications for public service. If you take an oath and you have violated that oath by not supporting, because it talks about rebellion against the Constitution.
Okay. So let's take that.
Okay.
Has that ever been used in our lifetime to actually disqualify someone that knowingly passes a law or an ordinance or whatever, knowing that it's against the Constitution, but they don't care and they do it anyways? Has anybody ever?
Well, so there's been many times where people have, actually Obama and Congress knew that they were violating the Constitution with Obamacare.
Right.
But the question is, did they know that those teeth were even, I can tell you that the 17th Amendment was written by idiots that didn't know that they created a conflict within the Constitution with the Amendment Protection Clause in Article 5, that states must willingly give up their equal suffrage in the Senate. Or not, they have to do it with consent. If not, they can actually, there are 7 states that do not need to have general elections. Anyway, has it ever been used? No. But the good Lord actually put it in there because he knew that we would be ripe for this. And I'm telling you, what patriot, I don't care what political affiliation or no political affiliation, what patriot has not actually uttered the words, man, these guys take an oath. Can't we hold them accountable?
Yes.
It's constitutional literacy. Really, that's the greatest problem we're facing. So anyway.